Today we're going to read Paddington at St. Paul's by Michael Bond, illustrated by R.W. Alley. Most mornings, Paddington called in at Mr. Grubber's antique shop in the Portobello Market in order to share his elevensies, but one day his friend telephoned and suggested he should come in earlier. It was most unusual, and for once Paddington didn't collect the buns from the nearby bakeries on his way in. You can see he's in a bit of a rush there. How many pigeons can we count? 1, 2, 3. Very good. I was thinking the other day, said Mr. Grubber, what with Buckingham Palace and the Houses of Parliament, you must have had your fill of famous buildings. You can see from outside, but that's as far as it goes. I nearly got my head stuck in the railings at Buckingham Palace, said Paddington. Oh dear. Well, there you are, said Mr. Grubber. It's not ideal. He paused for thought. One of my regular customers happens to be a taxi driver, and he came up with an interesting idea. Not only did he suggest a place to visit, but he said that the next fine day he would take us there. He broke off with a twinkle in his eye at the sound of a vehicle drawing up outside. Can you see Mr. Grubber and Paddington Bear sticking their head out of the antique store? Wow, what antiques can we see here? We've got a beautiful chest. We've got a wonderful chair that looks very ornate. A very special chair that's been made by an upholster. And here we have a bedside table, it looks like, and some type of crystal-looking container. Oh, and we have 2 London pigeons dancing around. I'll tell you something, said the taxi driver as Paddington scrambled in. The place I'm taking you to took 35 years to build, and I'm willing to bet it's bigger and better than anywhere else you've seen. Ah, that's nice. I'll expect they used the same builders as the ones who repaired our roof, exclaimed Paddington. Mr. Brown says the job took 3 times as long as it should have done. I don't think they were around in those days, chuckled Mr. Grubber. The building was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, soon after the Great Fire of London in 1666. Wow, Mr. Grubber certainly knows his historical knowledge, doesn't he? Visitors are welcome, he continued, and provided there isn't a special event taking place, you can explore every nook and cranny to your heart's content. Only mind you don't get lost, said the taxi driver. I've bought a whistle for him, said Mr. Grubber. 2 blasts on it, and I'll be there. Paddington felt very important as they worked their way through the early morning traffic. Best of all, he made good use of the whistle before they reached their destination, and it worked a treat. Look at this busy touristic destination here. These famous London pigeons dancing away. This is St. Paul's Cathedral, said the taxi driver as they drew up outside an enormous building. The part I like best is called the Whispering Gallery. It's right up inside the dome, 30 metres above the ground floor, but if you know the right people, there's a lift, and the view is marvellous. Ask for Ellie. She's a nice girl and she'll look after you. Oh, look. There's Mr. Grubber, Paddington, and the nice taxi driver, the black cab driver. And here we have the Christopher Wren architecture and the dome. And look at these Hellenistic columns. Wow, how many columns can we count? Should we do it really quickly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And there are the same amount below. So if we do 16 times 2, what's that? So we know 6 times 2 is 12. 10 times 2 is 20. 20 plus 12 is 32. So we should have 32 columns. Should we double check? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. Very good. The taxi driver was as good as his word. As soon as they'd found Ellie, she led them straight to the lift. On the way up, Mr. Grubber explained to Paddington how the Whispering Gallery got its name. They say if you speak very quietly against the wall, someone can hear what you are saying all the way across the other side. So if you whisper really quietly in the Whispering Gallery and you're standing on the north side, you can hear it all the way on the south side. And if you're standing on the west side, you can hear the person whispering all the way on the east side. It's amazing. "I don't think those people can have read the signs," hissed Paddington as they stepped out of the lift. He glared at the couple sitting nearby. Why is he glaring at them? Because, far from whispering, they were in the middle of a loud argument about the number of steps there were between them and the ground floor. The man said it was 239 and the lady said it felt like many more than that, especially in high heels. Paddington gave each of them a hard stare before turning his attention to the view below. Look at Paddington's hard stare. Oh goodness, that's quite terrifying really, isn't it? My goodness. Having gazed for a moment or two, as though he couldn't believe his eyes, Paddington suddenly blew several warning blasts on his whistle before making a dash for the stairs. Mr. Grubber took a glance before he followed on, and to his astonishment, on the floor below him, a group of schoolchildren were lying on their backs, staring up at the sky. It was no wonder Paddington wanted to investigate what was going on. What could they be looking at? Should we have a look to see? Wow! They're looking at this magnificent scene. By the time Mr. Grubber caught up with him, Paddington had joined the children on the floor. "It's all right, Mr. Grubber," called Paddington, as he caught sight of his friend's worried expression. "I'm just admiring the view. Only I think a pigeon must be sitting on the roof," he added. "I can't see very much." Mr. Grubber recalled reading that if you lay on your back and you could see right up through the Golden Gallery and on through the Bull and Lantern at the very top of the building, some 111 metres from the cathedral floor. "I think you may need to fold back the brim of your hat, Mr. Brown," suggested Mr. Grubber helpfully. "Perhaps we haven't seen as much as we can from here. It's time we explored what's going on below stairs." And, as ever, he was right. It was like entering another world, apart from the fact that over the years it had been an area where many famous people such as Lord Nelson had been laid to rest. All manner of things took place there, from a rehearsal room for choir boys to a shopping centre, with its own bookshop, a tea room, and a cafe. Their buns looked almost as good as the ones at the baker's in the Portobello Road, said Paddington, licking his lips as he caught sight of a display in one of the cabinets. "So they do, Mr. Brown," replied Mr. Grubber. "In fact," he added, glancing at his watch, "it's almost time for our 11sies. Oh, I've got a little baby there wailing. Mummy and Daddy. Mummy looks very happy. Daddy looks bemused. Oh, this is lovely, isn't it? They're taking a look at some of the artefacts underneath the arches. Got some arches here. Unfortunately, it seemed as though a lot of other people had the same idea because the queue stretched rather a long way. "I tell you what, Mr. Brown," suggested Mr. Grubber. "Why don't you go to the shop over there to see if you can find a postcard for your Aunt Lucy whilst I stay here to get our buns and cocoa?" Paddington needed no second bidding, and he hurried off towards the shop. He'd almost reached the postcard stand when there was a sudden commotion, and before he knew what was happening, he found himself being swept off his feet by a crowd of young boys, all heading in the opposite direction. Deciding this was definitely another one of his emergencies, Paddington gave an extra hard blast on his whistle. "Wow!" exclaimed one of the boys as they all piled into what appeared to be some sort of changing room. You've just hit a top C. The choir master will be most impressed." "Are you new?" asked another, looking at Paddington curiously. Oh, so he's using the whistle and he just hit a top C note. "Hurry up! "We're going to be late," exclaimed a third boy before Paddington had time to answer. "Quick, you'll need to wear a surplice," he added, handing Paddington an outfit identical to the one he had just put on over his own clothes. "You won't be allowed to wear that," said the first boy, removing Paddington's hat and hanging it on a peg. If the choir master was surprised at the sight of the new chorister, it was as nothing compared with his reaction when they began to sing. "I'm sorry," said Paddington as everyone stopped, and all eyes were turned in his direction. "I seem to be having trouble reading my music. I think someone must have spilled some ink because it's covered all over in black spots." Wow, so we have the choir master and the new chorister. It's the choir master and the new chorister. Fortunately, the choir master was a kindly gentleman, and once the confusion had been explained, he was very understanding. He even let Paddington sit with the boys in the choir stalls when they sang upstairs in the cathedral, although he did not suggest Mr. Grubber should hold on to the whistle for safekeeping. "There can't be many bears who have sung with the choir in St. Paul's," chuckled Mr. Grubber as they returned to Windsor Gardens in a taxi later that day. I'm not sure they were very impressed with my arpeggios," said Paddington sadly. "I think it may have had something to do with the fact that the whistle can only play one note, the C note," explained Mr. Grubber. "But it was a very special note though, Mr. Brown," he added tactfully as he looked fondly at his friend. "You're going to have a lot to say to Aunt Lucy when you write to tell her all about your visits to St. Paul's," said Mr. Grubber as the taxi drew up outside number 32 Windsor Gardens. "It's lucky Ellie gave me one of their giant books of postcards when we left," agreed Paddington. "It was such a special outing, and I don't think I'm going to manage to fit it all onto one card." Oh, the end.